Our next session is addressing the technology deficit. As technologically intensive companies enter the A&D sector, how must incumbents ramp up R&D? The moderator for this session is Richard Thompson, Editorial Director for Mead.
Well, good afternoon. Welcome to Addressing the Technology Deficit. This is a special session of this year's virtual Global Aerospace Summit. My name is Richard Thompson. I am the Editorial Director of Mead, the Middle East Economic Digest, and I'm delighted to have this opportunity to moderate this very important session. So as the line between technology and industry blurs, we're seeing more and more technology companies, tech companies, entering the aerospace and defence sector. And this raises inevitable questions about trends in the aerospace industry and where companies and governments should be focusing their research and development efforts. In today's discussion, we will look at the trends shaping R&D in the aerospace sector and how different organisations are approaching their R&D and their development of technology. We will examine how aerospace organisations can most effectively invest in R&D and how these programmes align with national development programmes. And I'd also like to touch on the UAE in particular, how the UAE can become a hub for research and development, not just in aerospace, but across all industries. So to discuss these points and many more, I'm joined by three wonderful panelists who bring a vast amount of expertise and experience to the conversation. Dr. Khaled Al Hashmi is the Director for the National Space Science and Technology Centre here in the UAE. Elodie Robin is a partner at Gotham's at Hub 71. And Dr. Abdelqader Abusafich is the Head of Technology at Strata Manufacturing. So welcome to all three of you, and thank you very much for your time today. Khaled, if I could come to you first. So you're the Director of the National Space Science and Technology Centre in the UAE. Can you tell me about tell me first about the centre. What is it? What does it do? And then perhaps a little bit about your R&D activities and what your objectives are.
Well, the National Space Science and Technology Centre was established since over 3 years. And it is adding another research center in the UAE after having a Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center. So what we are focusing is on designing and building small satellite up to 250 kilogram. We have 6 main research topics in terms of the Earth and planetary science, onboard real-time computing, and also space situation awareness. And there are also other research activities, and this is mainly linked to the Science and Technology Innovation Roadmap that was established by the UAE Space Agency 2 years ago. So the center is really to fulfill the vision of the national space strategy of the UAE.
And your research work, that's done presumably in partnership with private sector companies and other agencies, is that correct?
Yeah, sure. Well, we're having now 2 satellite projects. Of course, you will not be able to do it alone. There is no one company build satellites from A to Z, So you need to cooperate, with international companies and agencies. And in terms of UAE, we just signed an agreement with Tawazun and Airbus, for technology transfer and helping us to establish best practices when we do the assembly integration of satellite. And also we went into partnership with other international satellite operator where we are going to co-establish ground station having SNX and UHF antenna. And it has both, partnership in terms of future project, and also is a commercial arrangement,
And where do you think your priorities are? I mean, is it about attracting the research excellence into the UAE? Is it about development of local skills? Is it the mission to Mars? What are the the sort of top agenda priorities for you?
Well, when wearing my hat on the space agency, I was the director of space mission. The first thing that we realized, the importance of R&D. And the first thing we have done, in 2017 and 18 is to establish a science and technology innovation roadmap. So we identified, what are the critical technologies that the UAE needs to own. It's not necessarily a complex technology, but fundamentally, what are these critical technologies that the UAE wants to own, its intellectual properties, in order to, in the future, to have a proper ecosystem where several space research centers contribute to a bigger mission like the Emirates Mars mission or any other satellite. So we have helped, the establishment of the National Space Science and Technology Center, another center in Khalifa University, and also in the University of Sharjah, and working with the New York University as well. And the important thing is these centers are complementing each other. They are not competing, but really to complement, So that is based on having a roadmap. And without having a roadmap, we will spend so many years and spending money here and there without realizing the overall benefit, So I'm very glad, to see that now the National Space Science and Technology Center, that I moved from the space agency to lead the establishment, because the size is a big one, and soon you will also be invited, to attend the opening of the first AIT in the region up to 250 kilogram, where we'll have the thermal vacuum chambers, we have anechoic chamber, we have vibration, so we have all facility that enable us to build satellite or lander or small rovers, and to contribute to the national space strategy of the UAE.
Well, congratulations. I mean, what is incredible, the level of ambition, I think, from the UAE, and the speed of achievement. Incredible. So congratulations. I'd like to come back later on, if I can, to ask you about some of those priority areas. But for the moment, I'll move on to Elodie Robin. Now, Elodie is a partner at Gotham's at Hub 721. Now, Hub 721, I think I can best describe as sort of an incubator for small startup companies in the tech sector. But perhaps, Elodie, you should explain it more properly than me. And also, if you can tell us a little bit about the Aerospace and Defence Accelerator Programme at Hub 71, and tell us also why would aerospace companies want to come to Hub 71? What are the benefits and attractions?
Sure, Rishad. So Hub 71 has been designed, by Abu Dhabi government to support Hadan 21 initiative. And the idea was not only to have incubators, but the idea was really to bring in one place, one physical place, all the stakeholders and all the means that startup will need to grow and scale in the country. So we have different type of stakeholder. Of course, we have the government agencies, we have the startup with a co-working space, we have the corporate. But we have also dedicated accelerator program. One is managed by Techstars, which is a general one, and one is powered by us, Gotham's. And we are focusing only into the aerospace and space and defense vertical, because that is a key asset in the country, and a strategic industry for the UAE. So that's why the government was aiming, to have partners to be able to fast track the growth of startup into this area. So what we do at Hub 71 is that we run once a year a 3-month program, and it's not an incubation, it's an acceleration program, meaning that we work with companies which are what we call in our sector pre-Series A companies, meaning that these guys have already got a seed funding, they are early revenue, or they have some traction in the market. And we try to attract, these R&D companies to come to the UAE, to stay in the UAE, and in fact to scale from the UAE to address the global market. And that's something which is very important for us, is that they should come to the UAE to stay and to address the global market. The idea is not to have these guys opening like a regional office, but it's really to have them moving the R&D team into the UAE. So the benefits, because that's, you know, when we launched the program, we don't work only with foreign startups, but mainly with foreign startups. Why? Because when we are looking at our level of maturity, today, even if things are changing, as you were saying, and as Dr. Khaled was explaining, you know, things are changing very quickly in the UAE. But the ecosystem, you know, the R&D ecosystem for startups in our vertical, it's still not mature enough to have a lot of them. So what we want to do is to attract, you know, companies from abroad and to boost, in fact, the scaling of this ecosystem. So
if I can just for sort of clarification, so the overall objective is to get that research capacity and that energy and the IP development in the UAE. Yeah.
Correct. And the way we see the program, you know, is to have this R&D coming, in fact, from startups, from young companies, and being able to have also a very profitable business case behind it. So it's very different, you know, from the way you used to do R&D in the past with R&D and R&D department inside the organization. Now, of course, our vertical, you know, has been disrupted a lot in the past years, starting with Silicon Valley, with players as SpaceX or Palantir. And that's what we want to bring to the UAE, you know, to bring these seeds here and to scale maybe the next unicorn in the UAE. So when we're talking about the benefits, you know, that was the first question when we started the program, you know, why and how would convince companies who are in more mature ecosystem as Europe or the Valley to come to the UAE and just to stop everything they're doing there and coming and scale it with us here in the country. So I think that one of the main pain points, you know, of our sector is that it's highly regulated. And of course, you know, regulation can be a pain point for innovation. And I think the beauty of the UAE is that we have a very open-minded, you know, government and regulators where we are able to have this connection. And I generally say that the UAE is a pre-legal and pre-regulated country, meaning that if you have the right technology, you know, at the right timing, and if you are able, you know, to control the risk, you will be able to get the clearance from the government to start with the pilot and the prototype. And this...
And in the financial sector, they talk about sandbox environments. Is it the same in the aerospace sector? You kind of have this regulation bubble, if you like, for new technologies. Is that how it works when somebody has some new technology?
It's not designed that way, meaning that we don't do, you know, like we don't draft regulation before it's happened. It's the other way around. Like we work with different type of stakeholders, and maybe that's where we are a bit unique in the world. And this is thanks, you know, to the UAE national strategy. Is that on one side we work with the government agencies and the regulators. On the other side, we bring the big corporates also on board. So of course, all the local champions, you know, as Strata and Dr. Abdelqader and the Mubadala asset who are supporting our mission and what we do. And also the big players, you know, as Dr. Khaled was mentioning, like Airbus, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, because in our sector, you can't do things, you know, without relying on the big guys. You need a lot of credibility.
So that's exactly what I was going to ask. If I'm a startup in the aerospace sector and I come to Hub 71 to sort of develop or accelerate my business, I want to have access to Strata or to the National Space Science and Technology Centre, you know, where the big programs are. It's all connected, is it? You can help with that.
Yes, as we run this program, you know, on behalf of Mubadala VC and Hub 71, we have, of course, this natural link, you know, with their asset. And also we work with all the different government agencies, meaning like we're in partnership with EDGE, GCAA, which is civil aviation, because we have all the same mission, you know, which is coming from the top of the country, is that we need to deploy this national innovation strategy and to bring concrete, you know, projects. So as Dr. Khaled was saying, like they were able, the UAE Space Agency, to put on track, you know, this new R&D center in a couple of months. And we try to do the same with the startup ecosystem.
If I can cut you off there so I can bring in Dr. Abdelqader into the conversation, but I would like to come back to you in a moment, Elodie, to ask about where you see the opportunities. So you can perhaps have a think about that. I'm delighted now to welcome into the conversation Dr. Abdelqader Abusafich, who is the head of technology at Strata Manufacturing. And Strata Manufacturing is a huge sort of aerospace conglomerate and defense conglomerate in Abu Dhabi, bringing together recently a number of very important government companies into this new entity. Welcome, Dr. Abdelqader. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about Strata first. I'm sure most people will know a lot about you, but then perhaps focus on your R&D activities and your priorities.
Well, thank you, and my pleasure to be part of this panel, first of all. And thanks for the opportunity to reconnect with my friends here, Dr. Khaled and Elodie. It's been a while.
Yeah.
I hope everybody's doing well. Yes,
great to have you.
Pleasure. Our R&D, first of all, let's talk about Strata, and maybe take it to one level higher to talk about the Mubadala Aerospace Unit. Mubadala Aerospace Unit is active on multiple fronts in terms of capabilities in the country and outside the country. And Strata is the icon actually here for manufacturing stream within aerospace. That's what Strata does. Then we have other assets such as the Sanad Aerotech asset, as you know, which does also MRO, engine MRO here in Abu Dhabi. Plus, we have also some share in automotive manufacturing companies in Africa and other places. That actually gives us the opportunity to take a look at many of these emerging industries or growing industries and see a need for, okay, in order to be competitive, you have to have that R&D element. And that's really what prompted Mubadala about 8 years ago to initiate the R&D program that's I'm responsible for now. By definition, that program started with Strata because Strata, was established at that point a couple of years, and the goal was to develop technologies to allow Strata to be competitive in terms of the manufacturing process that we have there. With time, this program has grown, and now we have actually 3 centers. One of them is at Strata itself, equipped with latest and greatest capabilities in robotics, in automation, and digital technology. Another center we have within Sanad Aerotech to support the MRO, also R&D. And the third one, we established an R&D center within Khalifa University, and Elodie actually visited us over there, called ARIC, Aerospace Research and Innovation Center. And the idea here is we cannot only focus on the industry outputs, we also needed to support the ecosystem within the country, including exposing UAE nationals to research and development in evolving technologies or emerging technologies such that automation and robotics and things like that. So as of today, we feel we have a very robust, exciting program. It's homegrown in the sense that it's totally funded by Mubadala Aerospace. And we are trying to run as fast as we can to accommodate basically all the changes in the digital industry nowadays. Within Mubadala, we have a focus now on 4IR strategy with all the technology streams that go with that. So overall, our program is a small one, but it's growing within the R&D. And we feel our main mission is to really support our assets with technologies that can actually help them be competitive. Because without that, you cannot actually see real value for R&D.
I've had conversations previously with organizations like ADNOC, Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, about their R&D programs. And they, like a lot of oil companies, they invest a lot in technology. One of the challenges that I've heard them talk about is implementing the technology, getting their different divisions to adopt and implement. Is it similar within an organization like Strata or within the aerospace and defense sector? If you develop new capability or new technology, do people adopt it quite quickly, or is it quite difficult to sort of get it into the market and to be implemented?
That's a very good question, Richard. I mean, I think all industries have what we call the valley of death. Valley of death means you go define a problem, develop a solution, spend 3-4 years to actually demonstrate that you have a solution. Then you want to take that solution to people on the shop floor or in a factory and say, okay, I'm solving a problem for you. Can you take that and implement it? And guess what? That's not going to be easy, right? So it's never easy, but that really means you have to integrate actually input from the end user as you do the development. That's the only recipe for that. If you go so far in terms of R&D development without knowing the challenges that you will see in terms of scale up and deployment, then you're gonna struggle with that. Yes, the challenges are there, but I'm proud to actually say that we have managed to deploy or implement some of these technologies already on our shop floor. It didn't come easy, but it's happening.
Well, congratulations. Just on the, in my role at Mead, we look at all the different industries, and we hear a lot about artificial intelligence or IoT or autonomous vehicles, whatever. There's a whole range, a whole sort of transformation going on across every aspect. In the aerospace and defense sector, where do you see the most important areas for focus? Is it around the software and the AI side, or is it somewhere else?
I think one thing that we are seeing in terms of probably a change in technology is that many aspects of your solutions are becoming more integrated today. So one trend we see very clearly is that the integration between the software and hardware to deliver a final function or a final solution in the industry. So, and that to me is actually a manifestation of the whole 4IR capabilities that we are seeing today. It's no more like the old days where you have the software engineers developing their software and the hardware guys working together to develop their hardware. Then you pass it over the fence and you hope that this solution is going to be integrated. That's not going to happen anymore. In fact, this has actually shortened. The positive side of this is that it has shortened the development cycle for R&D projects, which is something really exciting for us.
So is that part of the thinking? When Strata was created, this idea of sort of bringing the different parts together, is that part of the philosophy or the objectives of the organization?
Oh, definitely, definitely. I mean, Strata has to walk through the evolution any other aerospace company have to go through. And as of today, if you don't look around and notice that digital revolution is happening, many new technologies are changing the way we do things, I think you're going to miss out quite a bit. So Strata has been actually on the forefront of doing that. If you come and visit Strata, you see many of these digital technologies already implemented on the shop floor.
Well, thank you very much. That's congratulations also on your achievements over the past couple of years, and good luck in your future objectives. Khaled, if I can come back to you. So obviously, as the Director of the National Space Science and Technology Centre, your work is absolutely embedded in the national objectives or the national agenda. Where do companies? I mean, and Strata has that connection with government. But how is it coordinated, and how does R&D within the private sector fit within the national agenda? Is there a kind of a national program or body that kind of allocates research funding or sort of manages and coordinates research?
Okay. Well, I want to highlight first, before digging into your question, we have seen a lot of changes, especially to space science and technology. The center would not be realized unless if you have a partnership with the UAE university. So there is a mind change, and they changed their mind, they reset their priorities, and they directed a lot of funds, to support the center. So without their leadership and support, then we will not be able to have a big research center, inside the UAE university. And also we notice, the funding organization like ICT, the telecom fund organization, also they are behind the establishment of the NSCC. They are behind the support of other center or units, like in KU RAC, American University in Ras Al Khaimah, and they support several other entities, So we need that support, not only from the private sector, but as you know, private sector will not go directly invest in R&D or in a small company unless if, as Edie stated, unless if there is a certain level of maturity, So there is a big role, of the government or semi-government funding organization to help providing the seed money, so this center can reach to a certain level. Then the next step is to collaborate, with other bigger industry, for example, like what we have done in SSC. Now we are partnership with Airbus and Tawazun, for example, or other international organization. Without this seeding money or this level of investment, then we will not realize, or we will not be able to increase its technology or frontier level, So that ecosystem needs to be in place, and I'm very happy to see this collaboration, But one on the board of trustee for the center is the CEO of Strato, for example, and we have met Dr. Abdelqader, so we share some of the previous experience, their experience in establishing, I think, the composite center, for example, in KU, or other initiative, So there are good progress that we are making in the UAE, and glad to see the collaboration between industry, government, and very important, the academic need to get into R&D activities. When we did this STI roadmap and identify what are the priorities of research or fund that we need to support, in the space sector, we did a very comprehensive survey where we assessed the capabilities across all universities and research centers, and we identify the level of intensity, research level intensity that give us an indication whether there is a real intellectual properties or patent in or experience or capabilities. And then we map, what we want as a space agency in terms of the national space strategy or the STI, the roadmap, and what is the gap, the existing gap. And then we did, a three type of grouping, in terms of technology. So area number one, that is immediate high priority, where we need to put the fund there in that domain. And also, while the group 3, for example, we need maybe in the future, but not immediate need. And here, where we start working with university or funding organization to help establish the center. And also, for example, we are focusing now in the center in terms of attitude orbit control system or command data handling unit and software, or SDR technologies. So we are very selective, in terms of what need to be developed. And this is based on our understanding, what the national objective is,
Okay,
and,
can I wonder, I don't know if this is an inappropriate question. You can tell me that it is if it is, but obviously the UAE is a very wealthy country, but we're going on, this country and the global economy is in recession, oil prices are down, we've had the disruption of COVID, and other priorities are emerging, whether it's healthcare or infrastructure. So I imagine that the space program is competing for a shrinking bucket of funding. Do you anticipate, the need to find new sources of funding, whether it's through partnerships or, I don't know, export credit support? How is the finance in terms of that changing environment?
Yeah, before answering this question, this is a very important question, because government cannot continue putting money in research center. So the research center need to establish their capabilities and then get the outside type of source of funds, and without a roadmap, identifying what are these commercial or activities that could be commercialized and focus on it, yes, the external fund will come, but the external fund cannot come while you are at the beginning or you don't know what you are doing. And I'm happy that the NSSC now we reach, to a level, really we hit in key technologies that can go in any satellite, or we can use whatever we develop for Earth, not necessarily space, but for Earth applications, So that is very important. You need to have a roadmap, and you need the initial seed money, but the government can. It's very dangerous, to fall on what called the innovation trap, where you put a lot of money and then that benefit will not be realized in the future. So you need to be very wise where you spend money, and you need a roadmap. And slowly the government need to pull out its hand, once it reaches a certain territory.
So you have to become self-sustaining at some point.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that. Abdelqader, if I can come to you with the same question. Obviously, as a commercial entity, Strata Manufacturing must have been affected by the events of 2020, the COVID and the lower oil prices and the sort of slowdown. How are you coping with 2020? Has it changed anything?
There is no doubt that any aerospace entity now is suffering because of COVID. If you don't see aircraft flying, it means that nobody is making them, means nobody is feeding the ones who are making them. So the whole supply chain is actually being affected. And we have a lot of studies we're looking at in terms of recovery and things like that. So as far as the business, definitely, and we are working through strategies to cope with that. And anybody who tells you that there are no issues there, who would be lying to you. Any company nowadays has to develop their own strategy for riding this way. But we believe the aerospace is going to come back. There is no doubt about that, and it's a matter of time. In the interim, as related to my function within Strata or within the Mubadala Aerospace in terms of R&D, we are lucky to have leaders actually with strong vision and passion about technology. My challenge has always been not worry about funding as much as worry about going as fast as my CEOs are looking for in terms of developing projects. Dr. Khaled mentioned Ismail. I never seen anybody that passionate about technology than Ismail. So I'm not worried really about this per se. But having mentioned the question of funding for R&D, if you just filter out COVID for now, I think when I look at academia within this country or some special initiatives like the Space Agency, and maybe funding is not an issue for now. For us in industry, unfortunately, I don't see any mandated mechanism right now to fund industrial research specifically. So all our programs within industry have to be funded internally, and we have to justify that based on return on investment, IRRs, and whatever you have to make sure that happens. And that's fine, provided that this is at a level field with every other company that competes with Strata, competes with Sanad, which is not the case. Globally, as you know, even industry has other sources for funding through agencies dedicated to foster actually industrial research. In my opinion, this gap exists now, especially for industry that is trying to get into R&D game to support its asset to be competitive.
You've touched on a very interesting point, or at least one that I find very interesting. At Mead, we've been involved in various industry think tanks, and a lot of those have focused on R&D in other industries and the need for some sort of mechanism for industry research. And it's interesting that you just mentioned it just now. Is this something that you see as an important next step for the UAE, sort of to create some mechanism that supports industry research and development?
Yeah, such that we don't give you the wrong impression. There are definitely very good initiatives from ADIC, for example, recent initiatives to foster research, but still focus mainly on the academic research environment. As far as the industry is concerned, yes, the answer is yes. We are looking for an opportunity to create that mechanism, specifically to foster industrial research that can directly lead into business growth within the existing investment opportunities we have.
If I can ask, what would that look like? Are we talking about a center of research or a center of excellence for aerospace? What would it look like?
It could be a funding agency, as you see globally. It could be a consortium of funding agencies that can mandate, for example, a 50-50 contribution from government/industry in order to come up with technologies that benefit a broad set of industries. Well, one thing about the digital revolution is that you have now platform technologies that solve problems across the board. You mentioned ADNOC. I'm sure some of the problems they have are the same problems that we have, but in a different setting. So I think there is an opportunity to create an agency to kind of mandate or to foster support for development for industrial research. And that, as of today, maybe I don't know about it, but it does not exist. Even though the progress that has been made from academic research has been actually very impressive through ADIC and through DAD and some of the other agencies in the country.
Thank you. Elodie, if I can come back to you, I said I was going to ask you about opportunities, so I've given you a few minutes to think about that. Where do you see, from a sort of startup or early stage business point of view, where do you see the sort of opportunities for in the aerospace and defence sector? Is it around particular technologies like artificial intelligence, or is it in some other sphere? Where are the opportunities? Yeah. And perhaps also, how can you support and nurture those opportunities?
So we try to stay away from technologies, meaning, like, for me, the technology is just an enabler. We are investors and we want to scale profitable companies because, as Dr. Abdelqader was saying, it's a way also to finance this R&D. And I totally agree that the financing should not come only from the government. It should come from the government because at the end of the day, we are in a very specific sector, which is linked with sovereignty. So you want sometimes, to really own this IP because that will protect your people. And that's the mission of a government. But on the other side also, especially on the civil side, you can see a lot of different ways, to support what Dr. Abdelqader and Dr. Khaled are trying to do, and that are now growing in the US, doing some venture studio that you take the IP from the university and you turn it into like a scalable business model. So regarding technology, we don't focus on technology. As I was saying, we focus on the addressable market, on how fast we can scale the solution and make them profitable. And maybe the third way, which is the first thing, which is the most important for us, is that we are in the UAE. And I can tell you, when we were doing our scouting for our program, which was launched 2 weeks ago, I pushed back some technologies which were very interesting and that I think will be the future, in our domain, but I can't scale them in the UAE because it was not in line, as Dr. Abdelqader was saying, with the strategy, the strategic industrial policy of the country. So we try to attract companies that can solve a pain point of the local assets, and that can really, get a potential partnership or pilot or LOIs with the current assets which are in the country, and that will be able, especially with the COVID, to bring maybe a new type of business model thanks to the technology that will create more benefits.
And in there, you mentioned a number of points that I would like to come back on. The first one, at the start, you talked about IP protection. One of the important factors in any sort of R&D program is having intellectual property protection. My understanding is that UAE has, the required regulations for that, but it hasn't a track record of enforcing IP protection. I don't know if that's correct, but that's the sort of perception that I have. What's your view on where the UAE is, or UAE from an IP protection point of view currently?
So most of the companies that we are bringing in the country have already patented technology, as you can imagine, which are protected outside the UAE. And the nice thing of being in Hub 71, which is within ADGM, which has been launched a couple of years ago by Abu Dhabi government, is that you are under the common law. So it's not like only a UAE, like regulation, but it's directly connected to the common law. So that brings a lot also of security for the people that we are bringing in the country, because that's from its nature an international ecosystem. Regulated ecosystem.
Okay, now the other thing you mentioned, or these are perhaps connected points. You said you're looking to attract scalable companies, and you talked about the addressable market. So perhaps if I can ask you, what is the addressable market? I mean, are we talking GCC, or is it Asia and India? You know, how do you define that? Or, you know, it's probably an impossible question to answer, but
no, it is,
have a go.
And it's a very easy answer, and it's like we are talking about space. Like, I don't want to, you don't scale a regional space solution. It's like by nature, you know, like a global one. And that's what we want to do, you know, is that you can really leverage, and that's the pain point, you know. If you go to Silicon Valley, you will see a lot of brilliant minds, but it's a very crowded place for investment and to get, you know, traction and attention from the government. If you come to the UAE, you have a national strategy put in place by the government. You have all the different stakeholders, as Dr. Abdelqader, as Dr. Khaled, who are really embedding this vision, because that's part of their own strategy. And we can really like work as an ecosystem to all bring something to the table. So what we do is that when we source, you know, the companies, we really try to focus on the one that we can see bringing a fit to the local ecosystem, but for a big market. And the way I see especially space, you know, which is a difficult one to invest in, because of course it's heavy capitalistic and the profitability are longer term than a B2C application, for example, is that we really want to leverage, you know, space or defense. If you bring like really disruptive technology, you know, this sector will be more open to try them. And after, you can just leverage this to be able to use them in other addressable market, which will not be so open-minded as we are, you know, like we are sending people to space. So we are already crazy people, you know. So I think that brings a lot of open-mindedness from our side.
Okay, so if we take that into the identifying scalable businesses, so the businesses you're looking for are ones that are scalable. So I presume that's connected with what you've just said about, you know, the addressable market. So you're looking for businesses that align with the objectives, the national objectives, and the different agencies that are, you know, such as the Space Science and Technology Center or Strata or whoever. Is that correct?
I will give you an example, maybe, because we are very theoretical, you know, and we have one of the company that just joined our cohort. They are coming from France, and they are working on advanced material, which is one of the key sector, you know, the country wants to focus. And it's advanced material linked to Dr. Abdelqader carbon fiber. And one of the raw material that they need is sand from the desert. So I told them, like, why are you in France? Like, come to the UAE. Like, we have already, you know, like a supply chain and a value chain around carbon fiber with in the very early future Strata 2 and Strata. And we have, of course, the sand of the desert, and we have all the real estate, you know, industry around us. So these guys should do their pilot in the UAE, not in France. And we have a lot of other startups that we are attracting, which are the same, you know, they have more interest in leveraging what the country is doing than seeing their own ecosystem.
Okay, thank you. Well, look, we've only got a few minutes left, so I'm going to come round to each of the three of you with one sort of closing comment on what you would like to see happen next. So in the next 12, 24 months, whether it's you know, a particular change, as Abdelqader, you said, some sort of mechanism to support industry research, or the development of skills through universities. I don't know. If I could come to you, Khaled, first, you know, what would you like to see happen? What would help you most in achieving your goals in the next 12, 24 months?
I think what Abdelqader said, you know, it is time now for the UAE to have some kind of council or some kind of organization that focusing on distributing this fund and prioritizing, you know, and supporting both, you know, the research centers and also the companies, you know. Okay. Now, yes, there is a lot of several funds here and there, but there needs to be alignment, you know, between the academic research, which is a big fund, and also other organizations. That will make a big difference for the UAE in the near future.
Thank you. And Abdelqader, I'm guessing that you will say something similar. What would you like to see happen?
Well, ما عليك زواري, Dr. Khaled. So in English, I really doesn't have much more to add to what my colleague.
Okay, thank you very much. Understood. And Elodie, perhaps you come from a slightly different perspective. What are your kind of what would be on your wish list for the next 12, 24 months?
Like, the answer is quite easy, is that I want to see the planes flying again, you know, and that's the frequency that we used to have, because this will bring back the market for us, and we'll be able to get the money, you know, and the profitability we need to grow that market.
Well, I was thinking more about human actions, but
I know. But it's human action, because at the end of the day, you know, like the research now is also a lot supported by the UAE government, and that's how we will find a solution to our temporary problem, I would say.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much to the three of you. I'm going to bring the conversation to an end now. So thank you for your time to Elodie, Abdelqader, and to Khaled. I hope that you've enjoyed the conversation as much as I have, and I look forward to working with you again soon. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.